Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight, we invite you to descend into darkness with a chilling anthology of horror stories, each one inspired by true events. This is episode 21. Let the nightmare begin. The Visitor from the Closet. I've done my best to research this phenomenon, if it even is one, to no avail. There's not a single dream journal in print or through the internet grapevine that can ease my unsettled heart. 2 packs of cigarettes and a house to myself are all I have each night, and the light from the screen projecting the deepest and darkest corners of the internet are as comforting as a polite mugging. I just need to sleep without dreams. A few years ago, my father died. He was a good Nordic man, a sailor and a veteran with a heart of gold and a liver of blackened steel. After my mother stole my siblings and me away from him when I was a child, only to bring us to our jailer of an abusive stepfather, he has been my protector, my drunken, jobless, kind-hearted saint of a father. In the last few years of the boozing haze of his life, an entire 24-pack of beer would be drained within 12 hours every day. Each night, he would fall asleep with a burning cigarette in his hand and an aluminum can at his feet. Our ranch-style deer shack of a house never burned to the ground, but that would most likely be an improvement. I'm currently nestled deep in the woods, the developments of concrete jumble miles away from the original homestead. When he died, I was 23 years old. I had no family, no husband, and no morals. On my 24th birthday, on an unseasonably cold day in May, I buried him. The priest and I had the occasion to ourselves. I've been doing drugs for most of my life, but the remainder of my money and pathetic inheritance fell into the deep hole that is cocaine addiction. A year ago, I tried to sell my couch in exchange for a couple of measly lines. Even today, I'm not far from that mess. Not much longer after that, I tried to kill myself. Earlier in that week, up to the attempt, I had been catching squirrels running loose in the attic and had no idea how to get rid of them. So one day, drinking a beer on the back porch, I went to the sack I had them in and tied it to the end of my black Mustang's exhaust, got in and revved the engine for the entire woods to hear. When I opened the back, the corpses were charred black, slicked with grease and grime. It was then I knew I wanted to die. I jumped into her, my Black Widow, the Mustang, and shut the garage door. The ignition clicked over, engine blaring in the small concrete cube of a room. I lay back with a beer and closed my eyes, not even crying. But fate, or so it seems, wanted me to suffer. My father's Navy buddy, Ross, heaved the door open at the last minute, screaming, "Elena, Ellie," and dragged me out, semi-conscious, into the gravel driveway. He saved my life, and after such a kind deed, he died of lung cancer 3 months ago. Fast forward to 2 days ago. I was upstairs sleeping, and suddenly the door slams. "I'm home," my father bellows. Clear as day, as certain as the keys I'm using are real. I ran, tripping every step, to the stair overlooking our door, to see nothing. Just the cold and reassuring loneliness that there isn't a soul on earth that cares about me. Even my dreams have started to turn. For years, I've read scary stories. They give me a sense of power over life, a feeling of control. The words on a page that send shivers down your spine are a thrill difficult to achieve in other places. But there is very little truth in any story out there. But my dream, the dream is reality. Reality is the dream, only in the sense that reality is the escape, not the other way around. The night of my father's voice, I slept deeply. The bed in my father's old bedroom sits in front of a closet door, but in my dream, it was blocked by something. At the wooden footboard of the antiquated frame stood what looked like a man, very tall, well over 6 feet, dressed in dark colors. He wore what looked like a suit, but memory on the clothes is hard to come by. His face was very long, almost a horse-like quality, and pale. His irises were dark as well, and his expression was both blank and sinister. His mouth was extremely wide, and when he opened to speak, there were so many teeth I would certainly regret referring to him as a human being, but he never spoke, acted like he had changed his mind, and smiled, an ear to ear, wider than the Grand Canyon smile. And with that same grin, he lifted an overly long arm, with bony fingers like that of a massive spider, and reached out for me. With his pointer finger out, he touched my forehead, but never actually made contact with bone. Rather, the finger pushed my brain inside the skull. I felt as if he was informing me, touching me with knowledge. But what? I have no answer to that question. Last night the dream was similar, but he wasn't at the bed's end. He was standing at its side, like a family member stands beside the hospital gurney. He leaned in close to me, the features of his smooth and pale face, nearly translucent and corpse-like, the corpse that's been found floating under 6 inches of bathwater for days. This time he produced 2 fingers like a peace sign, and with the same terrible smile, pressed my eyes back, again never touching skin. His touch this time was cold, like having an ice cube against bare skin, only worse. On both occasions, I have awoken from the nightmare, with the closet door ajar, when it was clearly clicked shut each night, and thus brings me to my current predicament. The curse of the Amwisak. All too often, my nights would end with a freezing walk to the nearest payphone to reach out to a friend for some help. My car was a piece of shit. To be brief and spare you the mechanical jargon, it had a nasty habit of dying on me. Being a native to mountainous regions of Montana, this was a death sentence come winter. The snowy roads that cut through the American wilderness had long distances between cities. You could drive for miles and miles without ever seeing a sign of another human being. If you were unfortunate enough to experience some car trouble along the way, you'd have quite the long and potentially treacherous walk before you reached any civilized portion of the landscape. Luckily for me, I was located in Baker, a small town with a great community and everything you need to get by. A gas station, schools, and even a few stores, so I didn't need to drive around much anyways. Baker is a quaint little place where people tired of the mundane city life dream of vacationing. The beauty of the rural Montana landscape could fill 1,000 art galleries. Great as this town is, it's just great as a vacation destination. Being such a simple place, Baker doesn't offer its residents much. For me, growing up in a small rural town wasn't all that I could have ever hoped for. I wanted to see towering skyscrapers, Colossus stadiums, and experience the spectacular flashy lifestyle of big cities like Los Angeles and New York. I was stuck in Baker though. I was 22 and working in an oil field. I didn't have some promising job that would send me all over world, or even out of the state for that matter. College was a no-go since my parents were the working class, and the nearest college was hundreds of miles away from Baker. Things seemed bleak for me until just a few weeks ago when an old childhood friend of mine, Ryan, had reached out to me. Somehow, Ryan had made it out of Baker, put himself through school, and through some kind of business venture, had done quite well for himself. Now financially established, he was going to open a small diner in the much larger city of Billings, Montana. I couldn't believe it. I can still vividly remember our childish conversations around the Nintendo 64 about the experiences we were going to have once we got out of Baker. At the time, our naive promises held no real weight, but Ryan stuck true to his dream, and he made it happen. Beyond that, after all of this time, Ryan hadn't forgotten about me. The diner was set to open in less than a week, so Ryan invited me to travel to Billings as soon as possible. Although it was a crappy fry cooking job at an even cheaper wage than I was getting paid at my current job, the prospect of traveling to a big city to work with an old friend was not a proposal I was about to wait on. After all, Billings had colleges and so much more people to meet. The probability of finding an actual career or even finding someone to start a relationship with was an actual possibility now. I understand how wishful my thinking was to anyone who hadn't come from a similar background, but coming from a place where opportunities like this were far and few, this was the break I had been dreaming of. Since Billings was a little over 220 miles away, I thought it would be a good idea to ask a local friend to drive me there, instead of risking it with my own beat-down car. He agreed, although a little bitter out of envy that I too had made it out of Baker. Later on that night, my ride Ethan, some family and friends, and myself had a little get-together, a going-away party of sorts. As the party died down, Ethan and I sat together on my front porch. He confessed to me that he didn't want me to go. Even though we didn't hang out much anymore, I understood. Good friends were hard to come by in a little town like Baker, and I would have been salty about it too if things had been the other way around. The next morning, I knew that the next conversation between Ethan and I would be pretty awkward on account of the whole sappy, alcohol-induced, "I'm gonna miss you" talks we exchanged with each other. Regardless of all that, my anticipation for new life experiences overshadowed my apprehension, and I gave Ethan a call around 4 p.m. I expected Ethan to be just getting off of work, but to my surprise, he was still seemingly drunk from last night. He started to berate me and put me down. "You'll be back, you fucking loser. You'll come back and I won't be here for you." I slammed the phone back on the receiver and went to my room. I was so angry at my friend's selfishness that I rounded up my things and threw them into my car. I didn't care if my clunker could make it or not. I was at least going to try to get out of here. With all of my belongings packed up and ready to go, I started my car and began my 220-mile trek to Billings, Montana at around 5:30 p.m. Since the sun sets about an hour earlier than that in the winter, it looked like I was going to make this drive in the dark. The thick snow that blanketed the surrounding landscape only further contributed to the riskiness of the situation. After about 20 minutes of driving in my calculated, angry state, I settled down and recalled that this was a turning point in my life, and as such should be welcomed with a pleasant, peaceful journey. I put my anger behind me, reclined my seat a bit, and put on some soft music. Suddenly, the trip became a therapeutic godsend. I wasn't even thinking of the new, exciting opportunities that awaited me in Billings. I just sat down, shut up, and appreciated the tranquility of it all. Before I knew it, I had arrived in Forsyth, Montana to fuel up and get a quick bite to eat. I left home in such a hurry that I hadn't gotten the chance to eat something before I headed out. Satisfied from a nice hot meal, I hit the road to tackle the remaining 100 miles or so left on my trip. Conditions were decent, and my car was performing much better than I ever could have hoped for. After driving uphill for quite some time, though, that was no longer the case. The weakened sound of my waning engine snapped me out of my euphoric state and brought about the gravity of the whole situation. Instantly, I processed all of the factors. The snow, lack of an emergency cell phone, and the immense emptiness of my surrounding area. My mind raced as I racked through my thoughts to remember the last time I had even seen another car. Not since Forsyth, about 40 miles back. Not a single car or person since then. My stomach dropped, revealing the surprisingly deep void in my gut. Immediately, it had all come to me. This wasn't some insincere teenage statement you make to your parents by running away, just to come home a pathetic 20 minutes later. This was a full-scale, absolute, life-threatening situation. There was a very real potential that I could die out here. My terror escalated as I counted all of the possibilities, to the point where I found myself again afraid of childhood fears like the dark and of monsters. A mere 8 miles after my epiphany, my car let out a thud and then sputtered to a slow, winding death. There me and my car sat, in the middle of the road in a blackened forest. The gently rhythmic pitter-patter of the snow pellets appeased me into a hypnotic state of shock for a minute, maybe more. Gradually, the creeping cold that began to envelop me awoke me from my episode of comatose. Pellet by pellet, it came back again, reality. The danger, the fear. After some time had passed, I realized that I didn't have time to be frozen by fear anymore. The time had come to establish goals and act on them. My first goal was to clear my car off of the road. The visibility was quite terrible by this point. The last thing I wanted was for some innocent traveler to smash into my obstacle of a car and render the both of us helpless out here. I removed my seatbelt, grabbed my jacket, and hopped out of the car. Upon examination of the scene, I saw I was on a slight incline, so negotiating this maneuver in the snowy blitz would prove to be quite difficult. I placed my car in neutral and began to slowly guide the car towards the side of the road. The weight of the vehicle and slipperiness of the sleet-laden road caused me to begin to lose my footing. Now, running backwards at nearly full speed, I stumbled and lost my shaky grip of the car. I fell to the ground on my back and quickly sat up to turn and witness what would become of my vehicle. In the darkness, all I could see was the reflection of the moonlight on my car's glossy white exterior. The car bulldozed on and continued to accelerate down the slope until finally being swallowed whole by the darkness of night. I heard it continue to wind down the hill until the violent sound of a distant impact haunted my ears. I got up and ran over to the grisly sight. With the aid of my flashlight, I found that my vehicle had ended its ride at the trunk of a large tree. In my survivalist state, I did my best not to dwell too much on the carnage that I had just witnessed. My next move was to gather my most essential supplies from the vehicle and establish a safe way to wait for a passerby. I must have known in the back of my mind that my car wouldn't make it because I had brought tons of water, hand warmers, flashlights, a magnesium fire starter, rope, you name it. I tried to pop open the trunk, but the wreckage had destroyed it, so I moved inside the car to gain access via the back seat. I folded down the back seat and reached my arm through the opening and retrieved my backpack of survival gear. Amidst this terrifying trial I was facing, I managed somehow to appreciate the surprisingly decent job I had done in preparation. Everything was neatly contained and readily accessible from this one bag. Since I was alone, and with relatively few supplies, I knew that staying inside the car was a bad move. The snowfall was getting worse, and I knew that nobody would ever find me if my car got completely engulfed by the snow. My best course of action was to wait outside my car and try to stay warm until I could flag someone down. And that's exactly what I did. For over 2 hours, I sat in the blistering cold and waited for any sign of another person. Not a single living creature passed me by. This land was completely vacant. I was losing hope. I couldn't sit here and wait for much longer. I can't say that I was surprised. I knew as soon as my car had died that I had made a fatal mistake and that this was going to be a fight for my life. But I've got to say, it's a frightening thing to see your car begin to vanish right in front of you little by little. If I had foolishly chosen to stay in my car for this long, there's a chance that I never would have made it out of that vehicle alive. I was done sitting. It was time to move on. If nobody was going to find me, then I was going to find them. I decided to head back toward Forsyth because I thought that I had seen a small rest stop just about 6 miles up the road. Making that kind of a hike for me would have been difficult in the best of conditions, and given the current circumstances, this was destined for failure. But it was much better than just sitting there and waiting around to die. The first mile was easy. I was in full-on survival mode. I couldn't be bothered by any other thoughts. I was only thinking about what I needed to do next. I needed to trudge on and find some way of contacting a loved one to come to my dire need of rescue. But my transition from survival mode back to normal scared and worried mode was coming through in waves. Terrified for a brief moment or two, then the horror would be cast out by my unconscious in order to make a productive effort at survival. Nearing the second mile, I found myself again at the terrified end of the cycle. The adrenaline had departed far sooner than I was comfortable with. The expansive darkness that I found myself in was so unlike its daytime counterpart that it seemed to be an entirely different world. As a result, I found myself like a baby, scared of the unknown qualities of an unfamiliar new world. In the daytime world, I knew that monsters, ghosts, and all things supernatural did not exist, but under the veil of snow and shrouded by the intense absence of light, I just didn't know that with certainty anymore. Walking down the absent street, I swayed my flashlight from left to right, first checking the foreground, then pushing my sight as far back into the brush as my flashlight would allow. From left to right, I repeated this process for 3.5 miles, with nothing to occupy my thoughts but stories of ghosts, zombies, killers, and other staples of the horror genre. Each time I brought my flashlight to the opposite side, I flinched in fear of what my eyes might meet. After about 3.5 miles down the road, I had seen nothing until finally my eyes laid upon an amazing scene. About 300 yards off the side of the road sat a small, dimly lit cabin. The billowing cloud of smoke that rose above the house's chimney was such a sight for sore eyes that I could almost feel the warmth from this far away. In utter excitement that my trip could potentially end over 2 miles sooner than I had projected, I made a mad dash for the cabin. As I drew nearer to the small structure, details that were unseen from afar began to become increasingly visible. The house was in a pretty advanced state of disrepair. The home was slouching to one side, and its wood was heavily distressed. I was beginning to fear that house was abandoned, but then I remembered that the house was lit. Someone had to have been inside. This realization frightened me even more, because whomever or whatever was dwelling in the house was obviously not the owner. No homeowner could allow their house to become so crippled with neglect. I was just scaring myself. I needed to pull it together. My next hope of finding someone was over 2 miles up the road, and I didn't know how long I could handle the freezing weather. I pushed my fear and doubts deep down inside me and mustered up the courage to knock on the door. Knock, knock, no. I shuddered in pain as a sliver of the decrepit wood splintered into my fist. I shut my eyes tight as I attempted to pull the fragment from my hand. After a few seconds of gnawing, I opened my eyes and realized that the door was creaked open. I was sure that nobody had answered the door. Surely they would have said something. Seeing the decaying state of the home, I realized that I may have accidentally broken their door. Balling up my fist in my sweater for protection, I proceeded to knock on the much sturdier door frame this time, and got to work conjuring up an apology for damaging the door. Much to my surprise, nobody came. Seconds turned to minutes, knocking turned to pounding, and calling became pleading. I walked around outside the home, investigating to see if there were any other signs that someone was there. But still, nobody responded to me. The house was empty. Within 30 minutes of arriving on the property, I was beginning to contemplate just walking in. If someone were to stumble upon my home in similar circumstances, and them getting inside could have meant the difference between life and death, then I would understand I would have to. Besides, just look at this shitty home, I said to myself. The person staying here probably doesn't even belong here. What's the difference if I squat here too? At least long enough to get myself warm, so that I can make the long trip to the rest stop. I continued to reason with myself. 5 minutes later, I just couldn't resist anymore. After announcing, I'm going to have to come inside, it's an emergency, I carefully pushed open the creaky door and stepped in. Immediately, a wall of warmth embraced me, and not long after, so did the smell. This place certainly was abandoned. It smelled like the people who lived here before had gone without clearing the fridge or taking their pets with them. My face contorted in disgust, and I scrunched my nose in an effort to ward off the putrid stench. I swung my head from side to side, searching for the source of the grotesque odor. My slow, methodical footsteps came to a standstill when I realized the horrifying environment that I had found myself in. The shack in which I was residing was obviously occupied by some kind of dark summoner. Sacred jewels and pendants were abundant amongst the coffee table. Mysterious patterns of blood droplets filled pages scattered throughout the room. At the farthest wall, opposite the front door, stood a large shrine with an indecipherable character at its peak. Candles, pages, and other offerings accompanied the perplexing altar. Taking in the scenery, I tried my best not to theorize where the aroma might have been coming from. I really didn't want to know. My knowledge of the occult, witches, and all things supernatural was limited to what I had seen in horror films and those silly late-night History Channel specials. But I was absolutely certain that whatever had been going on in this house was not something that I wanted any kind of involvement with. Standing in the middle of the small room, I peered around for a phone. along with the horrifying scene of bloody manuscripts and other cult paraphernalia, I observed that the house was only lit by the fireplace and candles. I concluded that it would be foolish to continue my search, as the house most likely did not have running electricity. I didn't complain. I was just glad that I had yet another excuse to get the hell out of there. By this time, I had more than enough justification to turn around and freeze my ass off in even the worst of blizzards. Suddenly, I heard a loud slam. I jumped. My heart pounded faster than I knew it capable of, and I whipped my head around to see what had caused the noise. The rhythmic crunch of feet on the snow, scurrying away from the door, filled my ears. I tensed up and attempted to process what was going on. Immediately, I realized that I didn't need to know what was going on. I just needed to run. I threw my body around and sprinted for the exit. A sensational feeling of satisfaction overwhelmed me as my shoulder reduced the feeble door to pieces. Keeping all of my momentum, my body flew out of the dreadful dwelling. In an instant, that feeling was replaced by pain and terror as a hand emerged from the home and clutched a vicious hold on my head. The sharp, brittle nails buried themselves deep inside my scalp and extracted a handful of hair and tissue. The creature's tearing jerk on my head pulled me back and caused me to lose all forward momentum. I fell to my back, striking the porch staircase with such force that all wind was sucked from my body in an instant. Panicked, I shot up to my feet, turned around, and threw a punch with all of the vitality I'd left in me. In the small window of time before my strike reached its target, my eyes caught a glimpse of the horrifying beast. Its body type was similar to a tall woman, about equal to my height, 6 feet 1 inch. Its hair was matted and thrashed about, partially obscuring its face. The creature's arms were unproportionately long for its already tall body. Its hands, too, were long and thin and dripped with blood from the havoc it had just wreaked on my scalp. The being did not wear clothing. Its naked breast and waist shape supported my inference that this monster actually used to be an ordinary woman. Although I only saw the abomination for a mere fraction of a second, my ability to recount its details is a testament to just how shocking its appearance was. Finally, my fist clashed with the creature's face and threw the monster to the floor. The unknown nature of this mysterious beast's abilities convinced me that I shouldn't stick around to find out. So immediately after impact, I turned around and ran back to the road that I'd walked in on. I ran with such vigor and determination that I almost didn't recognize myself. Even in dire circumstances of life and death, I don't think anyone else has ever dug down as deep as I had that night. I maintained a full sprint for the remaining 2.5 miles until arriving at my destination, a small rest area with a gas station and a diner. Upon arrival, both places were closed, as it was probably around 1 a.m. by now, but I was able to place a call to my parents back home at a payphone. They answered with a swift, "Hello," after just a single ring. They were worried that I hadn't called them by now and felt that something had gone wrong. After my intentionally brief explanation that my car had broken down and that I was stranded, they told me that they were on their way. "Drive safe, Mom. Love you," I murmured before hanging up the phone. It was so hard to withhold my full experience from my mom, but I decided not to tell her. Not out of fear that she would think I was crazy. I really didn't care what anybody believed, but because I didn't want her to make a dangerous rush on the way over. The last thing I needed was for her to be so worried that she drove recklessly and got in an accident. I made it this far to reach my rescue, and I wasn't going to let anything impede on me getting home safely this time. For an hour and a half, I sat completely still at the bench next to the payphone. I wasn't bothered. I wasn't freezing. I wasn't exhausted. And I wasn't scared. My mother pulled the car over nearby, and my father retreated from the vehicle and ran up to me. "What the hell are you doing sit right out in the snow? You're gonna," he exclaimed. My strong embrace interrupted his more than appropriate statement. I must have held him for too long and too hard, because normally he would have pulled away within a few seconds. But he didn't. My mom exited the car, and I shared a passionate hug with her as well. Wiping my tears, I motioned them into the vehicle, and we pulled away from the rest stop. The car ride home must have been incredibly difficult for my parents. The scenes that I painted and the horror that I described was probably unlike anything they had ever heard before. I told them first about the car, then I told them about my walk to the shack, and finally, I told them about my experience with the witch-like creature. They must have thought I was crazy until I showed them the horrible mess that my head was. My mom nearly slammed on the brakes and exclaimed that we needed to get to a hospital. I pleaded with her to keep going. I want to get far away from this place before we stopped and did anything. To my mom's credit, she listened. We drove for an hour before I was comfortable with looking for a hospital. At the hospital, they explained the dire situation I was in. I was suffering from blood loss, hypothermia, and frostbite on the skin where the monster had attacked me. And now, I'd like to retract a statement that I previously had made. I actually did care what the doctors believed, so I decided not to tell them my story about the creature that had attacked me. These people actually had the power to institutionalize if they thought I was insane, so I told them that I had gotten attacked by a mountain lion. Somehow, I convinced my parents to give the same story if the doctors asked. Upon awaking after hours of treatment, a nurse informed me that a fragmented nail of the mountain lion that had attacked me had been removed during reconstructive surgery. My jaw dropped. The possibility that I could have some real-life proof of whatever that thing was staggering. "Can I keep it, please?" I shouted. The nurse gave a puzzled look and said, "I'll check with the doctor, but I can't see why not." Minutes later, she returned with the foreign material in a clear canister and handed it to me. "You sure that's from a mountain lion?" I have seen a few mountain lion nails in my days, but none of them ever looked like that, said the nurse. "No, I guess I must have been wrong. It was so dark out there, you know." I replied, "Whatever that thing was, you're lucky to be alive," she said. "That's one thing I can say for sure," I said under my breath. Back at home a few days later, the pain was subsiding, and I had a lot of questions that needed to be answered. I didn't really know where to start, though. Even in a big city, I'd imagine it's quite difficult to find good information on this kind of thing. Not having much to go on, I set out for Madame Elsie's house. Madame Elsie was the town nutcase. At least, that's what her reputation was. My mother always told me and my friends to stay away from her when we were kids. I never thought that all these years later, she would be the person I needed to see the most. I arrived at her front porch and hesitated to knock. The last time I knocked on an unfamiliar door, it ended with a monster tearing away at my scalp. However, I recalled that if I didn't get in contact with this woman, I might never find out more about what I had encountered, or if I was in future danger. Like I said, my lack of knowledge on the vile creature left me unsure of its true ability. If I was ever going to have a chance at peace of mind, then I needed to talk with Madame Elsie. I quivered and proceeded to knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. A few moments passed, and then I heard the sound of the door unlocking. An old woman creaked the door open some and peered out through the opening. "Yeah," said the old woman. Are you Madame Elsie?" I replied, "Yeah, why?" "Who are you?" responded Madame Elsie. "Madam, you don't know me, but I've been living in Baker a long time, and recently I had a very strange experience that I think you might want to hear." She didn't say anything back. Fearing that she would shut me out, I pleaded with her. "Madame Elsie, please. I hate to waste your time, but I have some questions to ask. I'm afraid for my life. You're the only person I could come to." With that, the old woman shut her door and walked away. I was not about to give up, though. I extended my arm, ready to knock on the door again. Just as I lifted my arm, I could hear footsteps again growing closer to the door. This time, Madame Elsie unlatched the door and welcomed me in. As soon as I entered her home, she made a command to stop with a motion of her hand, and I heeded her direction. From a nearby shelf, she produced a thin incense stick and a small bottle that appeared to be some kind of potion. She handed me the container. "Do not sip. It is bitter," said Madame Elsie as she motioned me to drink. I halfway thought she was kidding, but I was so desperate for answers that I didn't mind the humiliation. I took the shot of liquid in my hand and swallowed it. The taste made me cringe. Madame Elsie then proceeded to take her stick of incense and blow in wisps at my head, heart, and each of my hands and shoulders. "This is for my protection, not yours," she explained. I gave a nod in respect and allowed her to continue on with various ritualistic gestures. When she had completed, she invited me to sit at the couch across from her. "Tell me, what have you experienced?" asked Madame Elsie. "On a trip to Billings, my car broke down and I was stranded in the woods a few nights ago," I explained. In an effort to find aid, I stumbled upon a peculiar shack that had ritualistic items like blood-stained scrolls, pendants, and a candlelit shrine. Upon realizing that I was in danger, I tried to leave, but a woman with long arms and sharp nails attacked me. I was able to escape, but I fear that this is not over. I am afraid she will come back and haunt me, or even worse. "How long ago was the attack?" Madame Elsie replied. "About 3 days ago," I answered. "So you have been experiencing hallucinations and other paranormal phenomena then?" "No, I haven't, but the fear that I'm not out of danger keeps me awake at night." "Young man, you had an encounter with the Amwisak. What is that?" The Amwisak are a group of dark summoners. They were once members of the Native American Chippewa tribe here in Montana, long ago. When a great snowstorm fell upon this region over 200 years ago, many children and infants within the tribe did not make it. Angered and desperate, a small group of tribeswomen prayed to the dark gods to revive the young ones who were lost. Their results were potent, and the children were miraculously revived. When the rest of the Chippewa tribe discovered the truth about how they were saved, they killed the children and cast out the band of dark women. Now isolated from their former tribe, the women honed their craft and expanded their mystical capabilities. They used their powers to transform themselves into fearsome creatures that haunt, curse, and even kill. You have experienced firsthand how wicked they can be. Young one, though it may appear that my knowledge is omnipotent, do not be fooled, for I am puzzled. "You are?" I questioned. "Why?" "People who are attacked by the Amwisak rarely live to tell about it. And above that, those who survive suffer curses and haunting dreams for the rest of their lives. But you tell me that you do not encounter the same hardships. How can this be?" I racked my mind for reasons why I wasn't having such challenges. I almost wanted to give myself the credit, as it was my determination and strength that helped to ward off the foe and get back to safety. I quickly checked my ego and rejected this idea. I couldn't possibly be stronger than a group of women who transformed themselves seemingly through magic. "Tell me," she continued, "did you take something from the beast? A sacred necklace? A scroll?" "Certainly not," I replied hysterically. As soon as I understood the danger of the place I was in, I tried to leave. But then I remembered that I had taken something from the creature. Even if not purposefully, I had in my possession one of its own talents. "Wait," I muttered as I reached into my coat pocket. My hand touched the clear plastic container that encapsulated the monster's nail given to me by the nurse at the hospital. I retrieved it from my pocket. "What is it?" Madame Elsie inquired with wonder. "They found this in my scalp during the surgery," I said. "I think that this is its nail." She looked surprised. I began to open the container when suddenly Madame Elsie stumped my action with a quick swat of her hand. "Stop," she exclaimed. "You mustn't handle it. There's no telling what mysterious powers this fragment can hold. One thing that is clear, though, is that you must keep this piece safe with you forever. This claw is what saved you from her. Without it, she is incomplete and therefore powerless." Suddenly, it was all coming to me. Madame Elsie was right. This nail is what saved me from her. It helped me to find the strength to deal a shocking blow to the creature. It helped me to run the long distance to the rest stop with incredible quickness and endurance. It aided in calming me on my wait at the payphone, when normally I should have been consumed by fear and pain. And it saved me from being cursed or haunted for the rest of my life like the others. All of this I explained to Madame Elsie. "It's apparent that even after being severed from its keeper," said Madame Elsie, "this object still possesses supernatural powers. Although I cannot prohibit you from experimenting with its energy, for you have righteously earned it, allow me to provide you with some sage advice. Beware things in which we do not fully understand." I left Madame Elsie's house with a new sense of power and peace of mind. All of my questions were not answered, though. What was the shelf life of the witch's nail that I possessed? Would it fade away in a matter of weeks? Or would it last forever, so long as I did not touch it and use its powers as my own? Although I understood little about its mystical qualities, I felt a sense of confidence that I was going to be okay. The Amwisak were scattered all over Montana. That's a fact that I now had to live with. But I was convinced that as long as I kept this fragment in my possession at all times, the Amwisak could not harm me. While my experience at the shack in the middle of nowhere undoubtedly changed me, it did not leave me crippled, haunted, or living with intense paranoia for the rest of my days. It helped me to experience a sensation that I've never had before: absolute power, endurance, and will. In the moment, I experienced relative numbness, but looking back, I feel proud at what I had accomplished. Having conquered this most extreme of trials, I was ready to continue on with my plans to head to Billings to create a new life for myself, now unafraid of what challenges I might face. The Crimson Omen. Well, time surely does fly. It's already been 40 years since my wonderful stay in Auschwitz. To my surprise, I'm not horribly tormented by the memories of that putrid hellhole of a prison like most people I come to know during the time. Well, at least not anymore. Probably because, in my perspective, it's best to forget. Well, not exactly forget, so to say, but rather to just make the best of everything with the life I still have. It will never be the same again, but at the very least, I still have one. I mean, for Christ's sake, I stared right into the malevolent eyes of death itself with calm, but cherishing smiles. When you're faced with an army of Nazi soldiers guarding the camp, pointing MP40s at you with bullets with your name on it, you tend to try to remain calm, do as you are told, and hope for the best. To my surprise, it worked. Although, I don't know what worked more, the fact that I always remained calm, or whatever monstrosity that intervened that some claimed to be a rogue angel. After the war ended, I moved to the US hoping to get my mind off of this whole experience. A typical man's life story short. I was happily married, had 2 kids, Ellie and Jonathan, and then a divorce, lost custody, and now have a whole house to myself while I drown in alcohol. Hell, if you thought what happened during the war traumatized me, well, allow me to be straightforward. It didn't. Why? Well, it's quite simple. I never had any attachment to any of my fellow prisoners. I always kept to myself, followed the guard instructions, and never allowed any emotional connection with anyone. I know that sounds really callous, but during the time, you had to keep yourself numb and pray to God that you would survive. As cold as this sounds, I had nothing to lose. Every man for himself, I guess. As I drank a glass of scotch that I have longed for since the time of day, I received a call from someone I wasn't familiar with. As I finished the last bit of my drink, I answered. "Hello, Dr. Richter?" asked the unknown caller. "Who is this?" "My name is Noah. I just need to ask you something." I did not have the energy to ask how he got my number or how he knew my name, so I complied. "All right," I said in a tired, irritated voice. "Listen, I am working on a book about survivors like you, and I was wondering." I vaguely interrupted him as I knew what this was about. "Let me guess. You want an interview with me about my story during the Holocaust. Am I correct?" "Why, yes, sir, if that's okay for me to ask." I sighed heavily, rubbing my eyes from bitter annoyance, and told him my address. "Go ahead and come in tonight." "Are you sure?" he asked. "I have nothing else to do." "Go ahead." I hung up. I could tell he was an anxious young man who aspired to get my story out there. This isn't the first time I've been asked for an interview, and it's certainly not going to be the last. Over the years, I never complied with anyone. Not that I was uncomfortable, but there was just nothing to tell. I learned to burn those memories away and to simply move on from whatever hells I have witnessed. Besides, whatever I have to say, he probably has heard it before, so why not just get this interview over with? About 2 hours later, he arrived on my doorstep. I let him in without him knocking. He took his hat off and politely said, "Hello, Dr. Richter. I'm Noah Whitaker. Pleased to meet you." He held his hand out for a handshake. "Likewise," I replied. I welcomed him into my home and led him into my office. He was dressed quite nicely, I should add. He had an obvious smile on his face, as if this was his first interview for his new book. His smile faded away instantly when he noticed my personal library. He began to shake a little when he hesitantly asked me, "So, you're studying demonology? The occult?" I turned around and embarrassingly chuckled. "Yes, just personal research." Behind my dusty desk sat a massive crimson shelf filled with books, journals, and documents about the occult and the nature of the paranormal. On the wall beside the shelf was pinned a little old sketch of a blurry monster I made several years ago. He nervously smiled as he pulled out his pen and paper. "I apologize if this makes you uncomfortable," I said. "We can go in another room if you like." "Oh, no judgment here," he replied as he scratched his head, nervously smiling. "It's just a little unexpected to see that many books about demonology in one room." Before I could speak, he stared down to the ground like he was ashamed. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked." I leaned towards him and said, "I'm normally not a patient man, but you're young and have a lot to learn, so I'll let that slide." He looked up at me and revealed that nervous smile once more, ready to write. I asked, "So what do you want to know? How did you feel during the time?" Again, his eyes lingered upon the ground, ashamed of his question. I gently placed my hand on his shoulder. "Son, it's okay. What happened was a long time ago. Feel free to ask me any question you like, okay?" He looked upwards with a distant smile, regaining focus. "All right, to answer your question, I didn't know what to feel. I cleared my throat. To tell you the truth, I was numb the entire time I was there. The horrible things the Germans didn't affect you?" He asked in a voice more concerned than confused. "At first, they did. Mostly when I was in the departure train on the way there." "What was that like?" "It was treacherous. There were at least 30 of us in one car for 5 days. Very little rations and water, no bathroom, not even a little porthole-sized window to look through. Almost complete darkness every day and night. It was during the winter as well, and with the little clothing I had on, I hardly slept at night. During the day, I say I got an hour total because the rest of the hopeless prisoners moaned in disbelief that we were here. I heard a few choke out as their lives slowly faded away from dehydration. I always hid in the corner with my knees tucked against my chest, hearing all these haunting wails screaming for death to come and take us all. I remained silent as I drifted into the corner. I think that was the first time I cried as well. I took a deep breath after I spoke. Mistaking my tone for discomfort, Noah asked me, "Are you okay, Dr. Richter?" "Yeah, I'm okay. I just need a drink." I cleared my throat again. Anyways, it was horrifying, but the only reason why I'm still alive is because I always kept to myself. If a guard gave me an order, well, if you were smart, you did what he said or you would be shot or worse. Noah was puzzled. "What do you mean worse?" I poured another glass of scotch before I spoke. "You see, the Nazis were ruthless. When you're in the camp as a prisoner, they could not give two shits about you. To them, you're a waste of skin, God's mistake, made for disposal. They completely disregard the fact that you were a human being. It didn't matter who you are, whether you're white, black, or any other color in the rainbow, male or female, or even a child. Unless you were proven to be a good use for manual labor, they would kill you in any way they pleased." As Noah wrote everything I stated, he began to shake. "Wait, even children," he said in a really faint tone. I took another drink from my glass. "Yes, I've seen toddlers and even newborns thrown into pits of fire. Oh my God, their screams. See, this is where I started to become numb from the whole thing. Even after the mothers witnessed their children burning into a crisp, they would shoot them and burn their corpses in the same pits just because they could. I can still hear their screams in my sleep. As I filled another glass, I said, "I'm sorry." It's one of those few things that really haunt me even to this day. Noah puts down his pen and paper anxiously. "Oh my God, I'm sorry. We can stop now if you want." "No, it's okay. I needed to talk about that. I just need a moment." I took a deep breath and regained my train of thought. All right, where was I? Oh yes, that was only the beginning. It was like the first circle of hell itself. Worse was yet to come, and even after being emotionally numb, I still wasn't ready. During my whole experience from my 4 years of imprisonment, I'd say I spoke maybe a total of 10 words. When they gave me orders, I did exactly that. Most of the time, it was a struggle, but I did what I could to stay alive. With the very little rations and water we were given, I nearly strained myself until dawn, but I was still alive. They specifically chose me to handle certain tasks, as they did with anyone else they saw fit. I wasn't holding my breath, however. They could shoot you for target practice at any time, even while you were working at any time. In most cases, they would gather a large group only to be placed in gas chambers. Oh my God, the screams again. Even behind closed doors, you could still hear their screams as they suffocated to death. Noah began to get angry. Those sick bastards. How could they do that? He gripped his pen tightly. Because they could. And because they could, I almost died. I was selected for execution because my time was up. I was against a wall with rotting corpses surrounding me. I thought their reeking flesh was the last thing I'd ever smell. The terrified faces of my fellow prisoners, the sinister smiles on the guards' faces. I thought that would be the last thing I'd see. They fired, killing everyone except me. Somehow I was still alive. Not a single bullet hit me. I kept my eyes closed and held my breath and pretended I was dead. As awful as this sounds, I could feel blood smothering me, and I used it to my advantage. Oh God, this was when I almost truly died. I would much rather have been shot, but since they thought I was dead, they were about to dispose of my body in the pit of fire. Noah suddenly stopped writing and looked at me confused. "Wait, you said you were still alive because you kept to yourself, right?" "Right. And you're saying they almost executed you and burned you alive, right? Well, if that was the case, how did you escape? You're giving me two different stories." Ah, shit, I thought to myself. This kid pays attention. I guess I gave myself away on that one, huh? He got his pen and paper ready once again. "What really happened? How are you still alive?" I hesitated for a brief moment. I'm going to need another drink for this. As I poured my last glass, I could feel his anxiety. He knows there's something I left out on purpose. He knows there is a truth that I didn't intend to tell. Well, he will know why my truth was hidden. Look, what I'm about to tell you is completely true, and I do not plan on going to a mental institution. He looked at me as if I was delusional. What do you mean by that? So, obviously, you see all these occult books here, right? You will soon come to the realization as to why I do, but you have to swear to me that you'll believe every word I say. Okay? I'm not crazy. Noah appeared afraid. This is the part of my story that really fucked me up, and I have a good reason why I never talked about it with anyone. You're the only one I'll ever tell this to. I sighed. Ask any survivor of Auschwitz, and they will all give you the same reaction, same expression, and same fear. They are all too terrified to tell the tale. So, Noah, I know how this sounds, but you have to believe me, all right? He nodded yes while he began to shake. I could see a speck of sweat on his forehead. So, what happened? All right, here goes. I took a deep breath. So, there was this one prisoner who we all talked about during our time. We didn't know his name or his number for sure, but I believe it was Bruce. He was a really vengeful character. Rumor had it that he was somehow possessed or something. He occasionally attacked the guards, but the funny thing was that they wouldn't kill him on the spot. I saw him rip out someone's throat in front of an officer, and all they did was pin him down. I saw him rip out a piece of someone's rib cage and shove it down his throat with brute force. I saw him take a man's gun and empty a clip into his face. Man, he was one strong, angry bastard. Noah stopped me. Wait, he killed a few guards? That would be an understatement. He brutally mutilated them. Well, if that was the case, why didn't they kill him especially if he was a threat to them. I don't know. It's like they were expecting it, testing him somehow. I heard one officer say, "Perfect. Even to this day, I wish they had somehow killed him." I finished my drink. Noah grew even more anxious. One day, he charged up to a guard, tackled him to the ground, and brutally beat him until his head was battered. That's when they finally decided to execute him. After 4 murders, they finally decided enough was enough, which was quite odd. I know it sounds strange and abnormal, but there was something about him they found fascinating. It took 5 guards to restrain him. An officer smiled and shot him in the heart. Even after that, he was still somehow alive. They dragged him to a flaming pit and tossed him in. I hesitated to tell him the rest. "And what happened after that?" he asked. I stared at him for at least a minute before speaking. "Look, I really don't like talking about this." I took another deep breath. So before they almost threw my body into the pit, I heard shouting and women's screams. It was so grotesque, they dropped everything they were doing, including me. As I lay there pretending to be dead with my eyes barely open, I could see 5 guards restraining the violent prisoner. His face was covered in blood, and he had an eager smile as the officer approached him. I could hear what they were saying. The officer said, "What a waste. You were so perfect, but it looks like you're no different. False hope for a flawless creation only to fail like all the rest. No matter, there will always be others of your kind." The prisoner gave a sinister laugh and replied, "When I get out of here, I will find you, dismember your flesh piece by piece, and feed it to your battered face while your family watches." He then spat blood in his face. The officer punched him and shot him point blank in the heart. "Toss him into the pit," he said. I took a deep breath yet again. Noah was nervous but very intrigued. "So what else happened?" I sat there for a moment before I finished my story. They completely forgot I was lying there, so I stood up and hid behind a building. I know, that was very reckless and would have gotten me killed for sure, but what happened next? Oh dear God! I paused before continuing on. As they threw his body into the pit, I could hear him screaming. Such agonizing pain, but there was something peculiar about him. The more he screamed, the more distorted it became. Each scream was an octave lower than the last, and the volume progressed until it came to the point where it was monstrous and unbearable to hear. And suddenly it stopped. It was like he absorbed the flames, and he let out a demonic screech, gushing blood, which looked like a fountain of crimson. Oh my God! He didn't appear human anymore. His eyes illuminated pure white. His arms were covered in scales to best describe it. They were as black as night, with fawn-like spikes that glowed blood red with claws that took on the same color and shape. He had large angelic wings that looked mystic. The wings were there, but it's like they made the illusion of mist, black fire. I can't even describe it. The next thing I knew, he attacked the surrounding guards swiftly. In quick moves, he butchered right through their flesh, and I know this sounds crazy, but I saw him forge a giant scythe out of their blood. It was like he defied the laws of physics and somehow made a solid, sharp weapon. Demonic magic to best describe it. More guards came after him, and he took incredibly long and fast steps towards and slashed right through them. At one point, when a guard was in a pool of blood trying to run from the creature, the prisoner somehow created a thick spike that rose from the ground, impaling him from his anus out of his mouth. I don't know what he was doing, but it was like he could manipulate blood in any way he wanted, like he could control it at will. Clearly, their weapons were useless against him as he forged the scythe into a spiraling longsword. Can you just imagine the dread they felt as the last thing they saw were those glowing, malevolent eyes with that demonic laugh mocking their pain as he slaughtered them like helpless animals? It was literally a bloodbath. He brutally mutilated at least 15 guards before flying away. The oddest thing, he specially targeted the Nazi guards. No prisoner was hurt, not even a scratch on those who were nearby. It was like he unleashed all of his personal hell only to hunt down and murder those that caused his pain. Noah was baffled and shook with fear. So, he just turned into some kind of monster and killed all those people. He stared at me like I was a madman. I know how it sounds, but it's the truth. What he did to those guards truly traumatized me. I see, Noah said softly. He closed his book as he asked me one last question. So how did you escape? After the creature fled, the rest of the guards panicked and ran away as well. They burned all evidence of our documents, their whereabouts, and left us for dead. It was the Americans that discovered the camp, and of course, they came to our aid. I sighed. Noah continued to look at me in disbelief. I'm sorry, Dr. Richter. I don't know. Are you sure you know what you saw? I became furious with his question. In anger, I replied, Listen, kid, you don't know what it was like down there. You don't know what it was like to watch little children burn right in front of your eyes. I've seen the Nazis pile bodies in a truck only to bury them in a trench. I raised my tone. I know what I saw. I've devoted my life to find out what that creature was. That's why my family left me. That's why my kids were scared shitless. They thought I was mad. They thought I was as crazy as my stories when I got all these books, trying to find out what the fuck this thing is. Ask any other survivor or any other Richter that could tell the same story. They're too fucking terrified to tell the truth. So before you start calling me crazy, you might want a little more understanding of what I have fucking witnessed. Do you understand me? Okay, I understand. I got the chance to calm down as I sat on my chair. I poured myself another glass and softly said, Look, I'm sorry I screamed at you. I know this doesn't make any logical sense, but I know what I saw, and it was real. It really screwed me up, but I'm not crazy. Noah calmed down as well. It's okay, I understand. He politely asked, Did you ever find out what this creature was? No, I couldn't find anything that even closely resembled what I witnessed. Whatever it is, however, I have no doubt that it's still out there and it's hungry. Noah grew nervous once more. Dr. Richter, I have a confession to make. My grandfather was a Nazi soldier, but I strongly disagree with his actions and his views, and that's why I'm writing this book. But this monster, you said he specially targeted men like him. If I'm related, does that mean I'm next? Well, I highly doubt he'll try to hunt you down for that reason, but just in case he confronts you, just don't tell him about your grandfather. From what I have seen, he doesn't kill innocent people. Just don't piss him off. And above all, whatever happens, do not bleed. Noah had enough and gathered his gear and walked out the door. Thank you for your time, Dr. Richter. I must be going now. Have a good night. All I did in response was lift my glass and softly said, Cheers. I knew he was terrified, but at least he listened to my story. I know what you're thinking. How could this be real? The textbooks would have described this. Oh, please. Those damn history books never reveal secrets that weren't meant to be told to the world. However, that's the problem. Nobody knows who this creature was, where did he come from, or why he was there. All I know is that he's angry, inexplicably powerful, and kills any Nazi that crosses his path. With that motivation, I still remain unsure whether he was a brute vigilante or just a beast lusting for blood. As a storm approached, it began to rain unnaturally hard. Seeing my old sketch of the figure I made a long time ago, hoping I would find anything like it, I approached it with a smile while finishing my drink. As I stared right into those hypnotic white eyes, I asked myself, what the fuck are you?
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.